Yeah. Eisenhower had, I think it's 1.3 million German soldiers rounded up
Yes.
into open compounds
Yes.
and left to die.
Yes.
How do you explain that if he was a
He was
German spy?
One thing you can always rely on your Hun to do is knock over fellow Huns in order to deflect suspicion. Easiest way for a German spy who is in charge of occupied forces in Europe to deflect attention from himself would be to mistreat a whole bunch of Germans. So what Eisenhower, German intelligence were quite happy to write off several 100,000 Jerrys. Or your Jerry intelligence chief will always write off 1,000,000 Jerrys in order to keep. Eisenhower was so important to the Germans, he was already being slotted in for president in 48. The decision was taken to push him back to 52. But Eisenhower was already being slotted in by German intelligence, Canaris, in 44 as the German spy, the next German spy to take over the White House. They'd already had Hoover. Hoover had done a lot of damage. Hoover was very much involved in the Pearl Harbor attacks. Hoover knew about Pearl Harbor in advance. Hoover had done a lot of damage with the Great Depression out of the German operation. Hoover had successfully deflated the US economy. So the Germans had done a huge amount of damage to America with Hoover, known in the intelligence community as von Hoover. That's Hoover, the politician, by the way, not the chap who invented the vacuum cleaner. Different Hoover. The Jerrys had done very good work from their point of view with Hoover, and they wanted to take control of the White House. They were very upset at Roosevelt. And Truman was an American, and Eisenhower was their big white hope in 44 or 45. So they were quite happy to write off several 100,000 Germans in order to get their man into the White House. Similar betrayal of German soldiers happened in Stalingrad. Now again, the huge intelligence play at Stalingrad, Goering was involved. Goering, remember, worked for Abwehr. He worked for Canaris. Goering never reported to Hitler. He only said hello to Hitler. Goering had contempt for Hitler, regarded him as his intellectual inferior, which was a little unkind on Adolf Hitler, and Goering always reported to Admiral Canaris. And that whole nonsensical will supply the Sixth Army and von Paulus. Von Paulus was sold down the river by his own people. As the Russians understand, and the Germans now understand. I've had conversations along these lines with very nice Russian generals. The Russians now understand this, they couldn't at the time. Whenever you've got a military strategy that makes no sense at all, when you've got an army that's trapped and can exit and doesn't, then it's not just necessarily because of military stupidity. Most generals are not stupid. Most military chiefs are not stupid. If things are done, they're usually done very. Sometimes you get stupidity, but not always. Usually it's a result of something else at play. And that was the case with Eisenhower. So Eisenhower, running the German spy, ran the Korean War, or rather ran the Korean War operation into the ground. Eisenhower, remember, chose a chap called Richard Milhouse Nixon as his deputy, who was a little bit dodgy. Nixon was very close to the Germans, but then, when he became president, ratted on the Jerrys and started to act like an American president. So Nixon was a German spy who flipped. And then, of course, the Germans had to organise Watergate. That Watergate just goes very, very deep. We'll talk about that on another occasion. Or you can ask me questions about Watergate. Watergate, take it from me, Watergate goes really very, very deep indeed. There was never any deep throat. Deep throat was a group of intelligence officers briefing in Woodward and Bernstein on the Washington Post. To answer your question at the back, coming back to Korea. Yeah, Korea was very odd. These aircraft never allowed to fly over South Korea at all, confined operations to North Korea, and never ever landed at North Korean air bases unless there was an emergency. Always based north of the Yalu River, and we had people in London, people in Washington telling our air forces that they couldn't go after these aircraft. Now, what was the big mystery? Russians flying North Koreans. It was a Russian aeroplane. North Korea was officially communist. It wouldn't really have been a big surprise to find a Russian pilot in a MiG-15. I mean, you expect that was what the propaganda was. I mean, there was no great secret the Russians were backing the North Koreans. So hiding the fact that there were Russian pilots was never, ever the motive. The whole operation on the MiGs, the whole raison d'etre of basing them north of the Yalu River, keeping them in North Korean airspace, was to hide the fact that pilots were Germans. And the whole operation was being run by Adolf Galland. And who was he flying? He was flying the old Me-262 boys. I mean, these were his junk geschwaders from 44, 45. All the MiG-15 pilots had flown nearly all of them were ME-262 boys, or maybe the odd ME-163 boy, but they were nearly all jet-trained pilots, Luftwaffe. And if you look at Luftwaffe CVs, you'll find gaps in the resume, as the Americans say, round about the time of the Korean War. There's a big gap in Adolf Galland's resume. Take it from me, from 1950 to 53. Galland I never met, but he was a friend of a number of friends, and one has had conversations with sort of, I suppose, Inspector General of the Luftwaffe level about German pilots in North Korea and North Vietnam.
Are you saying the MiGs were technically derived from the 262?
No, the MiG design was not a Messerschmitt design. I used to think that, but I think it was probably an Ernst Haeckel design.
The engine was based on the Nien, which was directly based on the Whittle engine.
Exactly. Now, the Nen was, or the Nien, depending on whether you're from Peterborough or not. I always say Nien, but I know the locals always look at me strangely when I say Nien, and they say it's Nen. But I say Nien because I'm not from Peterborough. The Nien was supplied. Now, this again is odd. Officially, there's a Cold War. British government, Attlee is in charge, and Attlee decides to give the Russians the most powerful jet engine in the world at the time, which was the Rolls-Royce Nien. 5,000 pound thrust. Americans don't like to touch it, nor did the Russians. But why did we give the Russians the jet engine to put in their aeroplane? Well, because Attlee was a German spy, Stalin was a German spy, and the Germans were run DVD, German intelligence operation was running Moscow, running London, and it made complete sense to swing our engine over to the Russians. The Russians didn't have an engine. German jet engine research had stopped in 45, so the Jerry said we need an engine. Rolls-Royce have one, so the Nen goes over to Russia. That's why MiG-15s have British engines in them. Of course, we didn't explain this to the Americans at the time, so the Americans are thinking, why are the Brits giving the commies jet engines and resulting in excellent aircraft that are shooting down our sabres? Very, very big mistake not to explain to the Americans that Attlee was a German spy. Mind you, they might then insisted on us hanging him, which wouldn't have been a bad idea, but it was probably felt bad for morale.
Michael, they were also training Chinese pilots.
Oh yes, absolutely.
It was very obvious to our pilots that you've got a new lot coming in about every 6 weeks. There was green as grass to start with. The German instructors were then instructing them in action. And when they got reasonably competent, they disappeared and another lot came in.
Exactly. Yeah.
So they must have trained an enormous number of Chinese pilots.
The operation was being run by Galland, but you're absolutely right, Bill. Galland was trying to train the Chinese to fly MiGs. The only problem is that your average Chinaman, no offence intended, doesn't make a very good jet pilot. They had real problems. The Chinese. Sorry?
It's like drivers on the road.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. Yeah, your Chinese, there were very few Chinese. I mean, name me a great Chinese aviator.
They can't see, can they? Got slitty eyes.
Well,
I was actually cursing Chinese drivers on the M12.
You've been listening to the Duke of Edinburgh.
His Royal Highness Duke is a very sound chap and very, very sound opinion. I have to emphasise that this speech is being conducted in strict compliance with the Bar Council's Equal Opportunities and Inclusiveness and Diversity Guidelines. So I couldn't possibly say that the Chinese don't make good spies because they've got slitty eyes, good flyers. It's a cultural thing. There are no great Chinese fighter racers because there are no great Chinese fighter racers. It's just not a Chinese thing. It's not.
Table tennis, though.
Very good table tennis. Yep. No, you can't. Your Chinaman's very good at table tennis. If ping pong's your game, you're playing against a Chinaman, likely to get stuffed. Your Chinaman does very well at ping pong. Not so good as jet fighter racers shooting down Americans and Brits. Why that should be so?
The Japanese are good.
Yes, although that's actually very interesting. The Japanese, I will come back to North Korea. I don't, as the chairman knows, I don't ignore questions. I'm not like David Cameron. I'm not a politician, and that's why I haven't got anywhere in the Conservative Party. I'm too honest, and I failed the intelligence test, or more precisely, I think you said the lack of intelligence test. As you probably know, there's an intelligence test.
I do like his throwaway line.
I like to do the throwaway.